Hello and welcome to another UKGN Network podcast. I'm Zoidberg. We've spent the majority of this week in a galaxy far, far away, playing Respawn's excellent Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. The Titanfall 2 developer had already proven that they could create a compelling single-player experience, so we're pleased to report that they've done the same within the Star Wars universe. In the last couple of months, we've gone from being excited about the arrival of this game, to a little bit of trepidation, back to excited again, and then finally back to being mildly worried. Alarm bells were ringing as recently as a couple of weeks ago, as the first impression articles started to appear, and everyone was saying that it was just like Dark Souls. Thankfully, despite a couple of similar features, this is not the case. The game it most closely resembles is the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot, which is one of my favourite series of recent times. You even spend most of your time searching for and raiding tombs, looking for ancient Jedi artefacts, so the influence is obvious. The levels are huge and ripe for exploration, with shortcuts to discover and secrets everywhere, and it's fun to just climb, swing and jump your way around. Lightsaber combat is fast and fluid, and it's incredibly satisfying to take down stormtroopers with your increasing repertoire of moves. Sadly, the same can't be said about the wildlife that you encounter, which are annoying more often than not. Learning how to parry and block attacks is the key to success, but there's a nice approach to difficulty levels that means it will never be too challenging for anyone. We've seen reports of some players experiencing game-breaking glitches and bugs, but we've honestly not seen anything worth mentioning in our time playing it. Jedi Fallen Order would sit happily on any list of the best Star Wars games ever made. For now though, here's our favourite 5. Star Wars. Atari took one of the most iconic action sequences in cinema history, the final Death Star assault, and turned it into an addictive and memorable arcade game. With its clean vector graphics, booming speakers and cockpit-style cabinet, the arcade visitors of 1983 simply had to stop and look as they walked past. There are 3 stages to each assault: evading TIE fighters in space, avoiding the turrets as you skim across the surface of the space station, and then finally the race down the trench to the exhaust port. And the difficulty level increases each time, and it's always fun. This was also one of the first games we ever played on the Atari ST, with an excellent conversion where mouse control was a perfect fit, and it remained a game that we would return to over and over again for years. Super Star Wars. The Super Nintendo wasn't exactly short of excellent platform games, but not all of them could boast a faithful adaptation of John Williams' fantastic music. Super Star Wars takes a fair amount of artistic license with its retelling of the story of Episode 4. We're pretty sure that Luke didn't mount a one-man assault on the Jawa Crawler, for instance, but you won't care as it makes for a very entertaining game. The fantastic sound design doesn't stop at the music either, with authentic laser blasts and creature sounds throughout. Some of the level design doesn't stand up very well by today's standards, but that doesn't stop it from being a game that we still enjoy coming back to all these years later. It was so good that when it was announced that The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi would be getting the same treatment, nobody complained. Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire. For many, the wider lore of the Star Wars universe extends way beyond the movies, and Shadows of the Empire is actually part of a series that included a novel and comic books, and that in itself makes the game noteworthy. The plot runs parallel with Empire and Jedi, beginning with one of the better versions of the Battle of Hoth, where you get to use your tow cables to take down AT-AT walkers. For most of the levels though, it plays like a third-person shooter, and takes you through familiar locations such as the Mos Eisley Spaceport and Echo Base, with boss fights that pit you against Scout Walkers and even Boba Fett amongst others. The N64 version in particular was one that we enjoyed playing, but the PC version is still available to buy today for less than £5. Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic. Before Star Wars, BioWare had made a name for themselves with RPG fans as the makers of Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights, but it was Knights of the Old Republic that truly cemented their reputation. Setting the game thousands of years before the Star Wars most people know allowed them the freedom to tell a brand new story, and it won numerous Game of the Year awards after release in 2003. The story is fantastic, and it features a final act twist, which we won't spoil here if you haven't played it, that remains one of the most memorable in gaming. BioWare would return to the era in 2011 with The Old Republic, which is the only MMO that's ever managed to hold our attention for longer than a few hours. Star Wars Battlefront. DICE's Battlefront gets a lot of unwarranted stick, but the fact is it's a brilliant, good-looking shooter and a fantastic slice of fan service at the same time. Fans of the original Battlefront games forget that what it called single player was actually just a conquest mode with bots, whereas here you get some great single player challenges, including an awesome speeder bike chase that make playing on your own worthwhile. If you have a PlayStation VR, you also get to sit in the cockpit of an X-Wing and fulfill a childhood dream, in what's still one of the best uses of VR we've ever experienced. The sequel may have muddied the series' reputation, but very few online shooters are as well made or as fun as this one. Now it's time to talk about the new games we've played this week, with our reviews. You wouldn't have thought that making a decent game out of the Terminator franchise would be so difficult, yet time and time again developers keep messing it up. The latest to try is Teon with Terminator Resistance. They've actually done a pretty decent job of creating levels that look just like the opening minutes of T2, with a war-torn city full of bombed-out buildings. Sadly, that's about as much as you can say about this game that's good. It feels like the kind of generic first-person shooter that were 10 a penny last generation, with boring characters and tedious gunplay. What's worse is that you won't even get to fight a proper T-800 Terminator until you're a few levels in, and by that time you'll simply not care. If this had been a budget release, we'd have probably been a bit more forgiving, but as a full price release, there's simply nothing here to justify the asking price. Sociable Soccer launched almost without any fanfare onto Apple Arcade last week, having been sat in early access on the PC for over a year. It's a hugely enjoyable arcade football game from the same creative mind as Sensible World of Soccer, which I still consider to be the best football game ever made. Like that game, this offers up a fast, free-flowing game of football, with simple controls that anyone can get to grips with, but it doesn't get everything right. Whenever the opposing team have the ball, I was almost never in control of the player that I wanted to be, and there's no button to change it. The biggest issue though concerns the main part of the game. There's a whole season mode inspired by the PES Master League that I've been unable to play, simply because I don't have an Apple Game Center account. Signing up for one requires an iOS device which I don't own, meaning that I'm stuck playing single matches. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. Sports games are better when they pay more attention to being a video game than they do to realism. Even with its issues, I'd rather play this than FIFA every time, and if it came to consoles, I'd buy it instantly. Narcos Rise of the Cartels is a surprisingly decent adaptation of the hit Netflix TV show. Taking its inspiration from the XCOM series, it's a turn-based strategy game that puts you in control of both the DEA and, once you've finished that side of the story, the Narcos themselves in a number of well-executed levels. Even if you've not seen the series, there's plenty here to enjoy, as you move your team around and try to outthink your opponents. You can take up to 5 team members into each encounter, but careful consideration is required as death is permanent, and losing a strong team can feel truly devastating. Battles move at a fairly brisk pace, as each side only gets to move one single unit each turn, but it makes them more enjoyable and challenging. There are so many tactics that you can employ that you'll want to replay levels just to see what you can do differently. If you're a fan of the show, you were probably expecting a lazy cash-in, but it's actually a polished and enjoyable strategy game in its own right. There's no Retro Game of the Week to round off the show this week, as we've got something far more exciting to share. In keeping with our Star Wars theme, we actually have a copy of Jedi Fallen Order Deluxe Edition as a download code to give away to one lucky Xbox One owner. In order to be in with a chance of winning, post a comment to this video on YouTube before 11:59 PM on Sunday the 24th of November, and tell us what your favourite Star Wars game is. You don't even have to tell us why. We've told you what we think, now we're genuinely interested to know what you like. There are no wrong answers, just opinions. Maybe you're a fan of one of the games that we've mentioned already, or perhaps you think we missed one. Now's your chance to tell us, and you could find yourself with a new game to play by doing so. What could be better than that? The names of everyone who comments will be entered into a prize draw, with the winner being chosen at random. We'll notify the winner and send them their prize straight away, but we'll also announce who won on next week's podcast, which will be available at the same time, 7 PM next Friday. Be sure to come back for the next episode too, as it's the beginning of our review of 2019, looking back at the most interesting things that happened in the first quarter of the year. Make sure you give us a like and subscribe to be sure that you don't miss it. Until then, why not follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at UKGaming Network to find out what we're currently playing. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
A Bronca scrap rat playing Jedi. I told the